Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Co-Living Life. I'm Dr. T, and we have the distinct pleasure of being informed and given best practices for safe, affordable co-living, whether you're domestic or around the globe, from one of our members of the Co-Living Life and an all-around co-living OG. So, Chanel, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chanel. I am your resident co-living OG. I've been co-living since 2000, maybe 15. On and off, I've probably had about maybe 4 or 5 housemates is what I call us. And I'm just anxious to share my experience with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making time for us. Okay, so what was your initial motivation for co-living and getting involved in the community?
Well, initially I wanted to co-live because I realized that I couldn't occupy all of the space in my home at one time. So I thought it would be cool if I could capitalize on that extra space by renting it out.
Okay.
And the spaces that, I had available were, I have a guest room, and then the previous homeowner, they converted the garage into a mother-in-law suite. So that space is 211 square feet. It has a private bathroom. The room itself, it can fit a full queen size bedroom set. It has a living room area. And as I said, a private bathroom. So it was perfect for, someone who was looking for a bit more privacy. And it just made sense. And fortunately for me, it worked out. So at this point, I no longer rent out my guest room. I wanted to be a little selfish and keep that guest room for my friends and family when they visited. But initially, before actually last year, I had been renting out my guest room and my mother-in-law suite.
Oh, wow. The mother-in-law suite, how do you get people out of there? Like, is it vacant now? Like, who would leave that?
And you know what? Actually, that's been the space that I have had continued occupancy because it is such a great space. Most people would think of it as a studio apartment. It's right off of the kitchen. The laundry room is over there. So if really they wanted to, they would not even have to come out of the room because again, they have the living room space. They, can eat in there. They have the bedroom space. It's right off the kitchen, so they don't have to go far. So, the folks who have stayed here have really appreciated it.
Yes. So there's the converted garage that, and then there's the guest room. Were there any other rooms that you had available to house co-living mates?
Nope, just the guest room and the mother-in-law suite. However, there are some shared areas, of course, those being the living room, the dining room, the kitchen. I have a deck space with outdoor furniture, grill. So, all of those spaces are open to anyone who lives here.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so who are you accepting as co-living mates? Are you looking for a particular age group, or have you had a particular age group, or were they professionals? A lot of travel nurses look for spaces outside of hotels. And then
Mhm.
some tech consultants can now use their per diem to find a space. So who have you had sharing those spaces?
So my very first housemate was my baby sister.
Okay.
And that was a very eye-opening experience for me.
Okay.
Um, Living with family can be very tricky, but there's a significant age difference between us. So we were both in our 20s, but she's 7 years younger than me. Never had roommates before. And for her, I'm her big sister, right? So I would come home and she would say, "What's for dinner?" And I'm
Right.
looking at her like, right? Every woman for herself, right? Because even though we share spaces, we don't share food. I mean, there have been times where roommates have cooked and stuff like that, and then they may offer something, but no one ever assumes that the groceries we buy are shared. That's
Okay.
just one of the rules that we have. So that was challenging, and it did not last long, thankfully. Um, the next the next housemate that I had, I was actually, he was referred to me by a colleague of mine that I worked with. A woman that she worked with had a son who was leaving the military, and he was coming to Orlando to attend college. And, he was looking for housing. My colleague knew that I had a space that I rented. So she asked me about it, and he ended up moving in. And it was fine because the way that my house is set up, he was in the mother-in-law suite, which is on one side of the house, and where my bedroom and my guest room, which at that time was also rented out to a woman, were located. It just gives us, it gave the women privacy, and it gave him privacy as well. He always took out the trash.
Hey.
So that was nice too. Um, and then after that, after he moved out, another woman took over the mother-in-law suite. And I think she may have been there for 5 years. So she was probably the longest tenant. And then the other woman who occupied my guest room, I actually met her in college. And she had a situation, this is after college, she had a situation she needed, to get out of. And I had a space that was open, it was unoccupied. So I allowed her to come and live here. And I remember she said, I'll be here 3 months max. And it turned into 3 years. Um,
Wow.
oh yeah,
Awesome.
which was fine. So um maybe 2 years ago is when my last long-term residents moved out. And so since that time, I have been renting to traveling nurses, which I have come to love because it's short term.
Yes.
So, even though I'm still sharing the space, I still have the community. I can have some personal time too.
Right.
So, that was nice after years of long-term sharing the space. But overall, I'm an easygoing person, so I didn't mind. But it was nice to have housemates there. And then, everyone has different schedules. They're all professional people.
Mhm.
Um, and it was easy to kind of work with those folks because we're like-minded in that we just share, we had shared goals, I suppose, is the best way of putting it, which is, this is a space where we have a peaceful environment. We work to maintain that peaceful environment. And as long as we were all shared that same goal, it's easy to just have conversations sometimes about anything that's needed. Sometimes living with other people, you just kind of have to there's some conversations you need to have, and there are other times that you learn to just let things kind of just fall by the wayside because it's not important.
Yes.
um and so that's what I learned by over time by having lived with my sister, right?
Mhm.
And then, those other situations that I had. But overall, it's been all positive.
Awesome. My sister and I had a co-living experience also, and I'm the youngest. But I did the cooking. But it was great because um, we of course we had common goals. At that time, this was years ago, we were both getting into tech, and we found this guy that would come to us and train us on various software, and like we were learning VB script, and just so we were right at home.
Yeah.
And then it was eeasier for my mom when she wanted to come.
Oh,
If we were hosting Thanksgiving, she just had to come to one person's house.
yeah,
So that worked
yeah.
out really good. And then I'm in Los Angeles, so that was in
Mhm.
Atlanta, so I moved to Los Angeles. And then
Mhm.
we just carried on with our lives. But that was a good experience.
Good.
Prior to that, no, I take that back. That was my second one because I had an experience in graduate school at the University of Georgia just for a few months when the dorms closed. That was a horrifying experience. From a we didn't establish real rules about housekeeping and that kind of thing. Short
Mm.
term,
Mhm. Mhm.
one of my classmates actually, and now that I think back, he should have done that because we had differing approaches to cleanliness. So
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
only thing. So how do you establish? Do you have a set of house rules or guidelines that you have developed that are a part of the lease that they sign off on? Or how do you approach that, the house rules?
Absolutely. So, anyone who moves in, when they get here, after I give them the tour of the space, their space, shared spaces, we sit down at the kitchen table. I actually have a list of rules that I print out on paper. I, go over each one line by line, and then they initial, and I give them the opportunity to, have a discussion about, because maybe they don't understand why. I have a guest policy that's 3 days and 2 nights. So, that's something that we can discuss. I do live in Florida, so from state to state, they have different rules in terms of residency. So, someone is at your house 30 days in Florida, they're a resident. If they receive mail, they're a resident. And I don't want to have to go through having to, legally evict someone, or
Right.
go through the legal system, if I have an issue with someone. So always we do a month-to-month lease,
Mm,
and then we sign those house rules. Again, some of them, we do talk about cleanliness. There is an expectation that, you're welcome to the shared spaces, however, you clean behind yourself, right? And so, what that looks like is if you use the kitchen, because I've had some folks who love to cook, some folks who are learning to cook.
right.
And so, some people's approach may be to clean as you go, which, may work for them. Some people they may destroy the kitchen and they clean up after, right? The
Right.
method doesn't matter to me. However, we expect that you leave the kitchen in the way that you found it. So you will always find a clean kitchen. The expectation is that you leave it that way. Or for instance, I have a grill on my deck.
Mhm.
Welcome to use the grill, but just make sure you put it back in place. I have a grill cover. Put the cover over the grill because it rains here and I don't want things to rust. So just things like that, but we definitely go over those rules, and that level of open communication has allowed us to just kind of circumvent problems.
Yes.
Another thing that I think is important to talk about is to let them know that they are welcome here. They can use the kitchen, all of the anything that's in the kitchen, from the coffee maker to the refrigerator, to they even get their own space in the refrigerator. They get their own space in the cabinets. Just so that they know that they're welcome to use those things, because what I found is, unless you tell people, sometimes they don't expect. Some may feel like they need to go out and buy their own dishes, which is up to them. But I do make sure that they know that they're welcome to anything in the kitchen, with the exception of food.
Got it. Okay, that's awesome. Have you had any emergency? So you said you were in Florida. The home is in Florida. Um, are you near the hurricane zone? And have you had any emergency situations that you needed to take care of, or even health emergencies with your housemates that you've had to step in and have some plans around?
Well, I live in Central Florida in Orlando. And so here, we aren't on the coast. So a lot of times we don't get the brunt of the hurricanes. However, we do get high winds and things like that. So sometimes the electricity will go out. And not only am I a co-liver, however, I am a homeowner too. So I feel a responsibility to the folks who live with me. So during a power outage, for instance, right? I make sure that everyone has flashlights. I even have purchased just like standalone fans for them, because it's Florida. When the lights go out, that means no AC.
Mhm.
And I just want everyone to be comfortable, even though we're in an uncomfortable situation. So, I have even gone out and bought big bags of ice. Now I have this little generator so I can plug the refrigerator in,
Okay.
because it's one thing for me to be suffering by myself. But when I have other people who are dependent on me, it's really important for me to do as much as I can to make them comfortable until a situation that's really out of my control is resolved.
Mhm.
In terms of emergency situations, one thing that I learned early on was you need to make sure that you get the emergency contact information for everyone who is in your space, because one of the guy that lived with me, um, he was here about 4 months, and then I noticed a change in his behavior. Very nice guy, even killed and things like that. And he was a student and he was working at the same time. And he was pursuing a computer science degree. And that's kind of my area. So I knew that he was taking some pretty rigorous courses, and he would talk to me about it from time to time. But again, we live together, but we have separate lives. So when I would see him, we would just have kind of like small talk. But I noticed that he had stopped going to school, and I understand boundaries, and so I didn't want to get in his business too much. But when he shared that with me, I just kind of let it go, and then he said he was going to go back the following semester. So I let it go. Well, over the summertime, I started to notice just some strange behavior, and I asked him about it. And he told me what he wanted to share, and then again I let it go because he's paying his rent. He didn't seem to be having any trouble that I could pinpoint, but I just knew that something was different about him. Turns out he was having a mental health crisis. And the way that I found out about this was I came home, excuse me, his car was in the driveway, but he wasn't here. And then I said, well, maybe he went on a date or he's out, but then I opened my oven and like there was a plate of food that looked like it had been there for a while. So I said, oh, okay, I'll talk to him about this later. So then I go off to have dinner with a friend, and I get a call from Home Depot, and that's where he worked at the time. And I'm thinking, why is Home Depot calling me? Turns out it was his manager, and she was sharing with me that she just noticed some different behavior, and had I noticed anything? And I really didn't know what to make of this call because I didn't know why they would be calling me. Well, it turns out he gave them my information as his next of kin, his
Oh,
emergency contact. So they were
yeah.
calling me. So then I became concerned because the pieces started to fall into place, between what his manager is sharing with me and the behavior and the change that I had seen.
Mhm.
Um, Ultimately, I ended up having to get in contact with my colleague. She got in contact with his mother, who was in Germany, who got in contact with his father, who was in Alabama. And I called dad because he wasn't in my home. So dad was calling around to the hospitals, the jails, finally found him. He was in the hospital. Um, and the next day, fortunately, his dad drove all the way from Alabama and picked him up. And that was ultimately the end of him living here. And thankfully I didn't have to make that decision for him,
Yes.
because it would
Yes.
have put me in an uncomfortable situation, because the last thing that someone who may suffer from mental health challenges wants is for their situation to impact someone else, right? And again, he lived with me for months. I never saw anything. He was a really nice kid and helped around the house.
Mhm.
And I had no idea. However, I feel like had I had his emergency contact information, I could have reached out to someone earlier, and we could have resolved the issue sooner.
Mhm.
So fortunately, he had a village of his own who cared enough to, show up for him
Mhm.
when he needed it. And therefore, it alleviated my being in the position of having to make the tough choice of asking him to leave.
Right, right.
And then I'm not a mental health professional, so I didn't even know if it was the right thing to do to ask him to leave because, again, he wasn't violent or anything like that. But I was uncomfortable because the unexpected behavior was just it was concerning for me. And again, I had another person that lived here too, so you have to just think more broadly about the situation. But that was probably the biggest lesson that I learned, to get that emergency contact, because you may very well need it. And it might not be a mental health challenge. Maybe it's just a physical challenge that they have, or, I mean, things come up and people need support. So, I it was a good lesson for me.
Yes, indeed. Um, so on that, so my sister and I, we lived in, it was a house that we were living in, and when I left, she ended up staying there about maybe about 6 months afterwards. And then she bought a home. So you offer a month to month lease, but do you require like a forecasted end time, or it's just strictly month to month? What's the notice period that you expect from your housemates in terms of them leaving or planning to leave?
So, with traveling nurses, they have a contract, so they know how long the contract is going to be, whether it'll be a month or 3 months. Now, in the case that they get an extension, that's something that we can talk about. But overall, I just require 10 days.
Okay. Okay.
That's it. I think that's reasonable for a month to month lease.
Yeah.
Um, I do they just need a down payment, which is a nominal amount. It's refundable, and it's only because things happen. If something breaks, I need to be able to cover that loss.
Yep.
But I've never had a situation where I haven't had to return um it where I haven't had to return a deposit.
Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. And so how do you structure the rent? Is it, utility, your thoughts around the utility, is it folded into the rent, or are there one-off expenses that they share in, or do they just have a flat fee?
Flat fee for me. I know how much like my average electricity is, internet, all of those
Mhm.
things are. So I just have a flat fee. I don't like to nickel and dime people, and I set that flat fee so that it's enough to cover everything. And that's all that they have to pay.
Okay. Wonderful. What about marketing? How do you market your place? How do the traveling nurses learn about it? And
Mhm.
then what due diligence steps do you take in terms of the the applicant or the potential housemate, in terms of understanding who they truly are from a character perspective as much as you can?
Mhm. So when I first started out, I was advertising on Craigslist. I
Okay.
know that works for some people. I had a former colleague and it worked well for him. But I do think that there's a difference when you're a woman and kind of trying to navigate finding folks to share space with. So I would not recommend Craigslist. Maybe that works for some other folks, but for me, it just the folks um, that I was just evaluating, it
Mhm.
to me they seem like scammers. And I didn't get anyone that I was ever comfortable with moving forward. So that wasn't the route that worked. Um, for me, I've had more success with word of mouth. As I said, I share with some of my colleagues. They know I share my space with other people, so I always have like friends or colleagues asking, "Is your space available?" Most recently, since I've been renting to travel nurses, I use a website called Furnish Finder. And through Furnish Finder, you can create a profile for yourself. Obviously, you want to describe your property, the layout of the property. You want to give the details about the area that you live in. Um, you want to have images that really showcase the beauty of your home. And on that note, if you're going to be sharing your space and advertising a shared space, you want to make it as welcoming as possible, decorated. In my mind, it's just like advertising for an Airbnb because people are actually going to be living here, right? You don't want it to look like a dungeon or uninviting, right? You want to
Right.
make it appeal to, somewhere that you would want to live. So, if you're someone who isn't really up on the home maintenance, this probably isn't for you. Now, you may get some folks who are interested in your property. However, I do feel like if you want the best folks suited for your space, then you want to present it in a certain way.
Mhm.
But I just took pictures that showcased all the areas from different angles that they would be renting out, as well as those shared spaces. I made sure to have a good bio about myself. Um, so that they could get to know me a little bit. Um, and also just wanted to highlight all of the areas of interest around where I live because, folks want to know how far they are from entertainment, right? What kind of neighborhood is it? Is this a walking neighborhood? Are there any parks nearby? How close are we to downtown? Everyone loves the mouse, right? This is Orlando. They want to know how far are we
Right.
from Disney because that may be a deterrent for them if we are too close. Maybe they don't want to be in the touristy area.
Mhm.
And so, that may not be a good fit for them. So I just try to highlight and really just play up everything that I have to offer. Also, I have a monthly cleaner for housekeeping. So that also is factored into that flat fee
Mhm.
that they'll be paying. And it's just something that I think just adds to the home. It's a perk. It ensures that it's clean. And I think that is the one of the most important things to folks, right? They want to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of cleanliness.
Absolutely. So, are you seeing, I guess without giving out too much, so age groups, are you seeing particular age groups that are becoming more interested in your space? Are mostly women or,
Mhm.
what's the demographics of who you're serving?
Well, so Furnish Finder is a website for anyone who is traveling, basically traveling professionals, right? Whether that's you're someone who maybe you're a college student and you're on an internship in a certain location, right? So you want to rent a furnished space. And so all of the spaces on Furnish Finder are furnished. And so it could be college students through, I've even had probably a woman over 60, I would say, looking for a space. Some of the people that I get, they may be going through a divorce and just need a space until their next home is built. Or I had one mother who was wanting to find housing for her college student. I even had a wife who was looking for a space for her husband because they lived in Jacksonville, which is 2 hours from Orlando, but the husband had a job in Orlando. So he needed somewhere to stay on the week during the week, and then he would be traveling back to Jacksonville on the weekend. And she also let me know, it's a situation where she may want to visit on the weekend. So we talked about that too. So with the rise of work from anywhere being remote,
Mhm.
I think that has really expanded like the demographic in terms of folks who are looking for a co-living situation.
Got it. Have you had any international interest in your space?
Yes,
So,
I have.
well, that's awesome.
Yes. So there's I guess there's was a woman who was in a doctoral program and she was doing her residency here in Orlando at one of the local hospitals here. And it would have been a great fit, but she didn't have a car. And the one thing about living in Florida, Florida is not um it's not friendly in terms of travel. Yes, we do have a bus system. Yes, there is some, they call it a train. But it's going to take you an hour plus a transfer to get somewhere that's 20 minutes. So it's not very, I'm from the Northeast. I grew up in Maryland. So like the subway, the bus system is life for us. It's very easy. It's intuitive. The hours that it runs makes it really convenient, not so here. So she couldn't take this space because after she told me where she was going to be working and then that she would be taking a bus, I advised her to look for somewhere closer. And there's a bus stop, right at the end of my block.
Mhm.
But I just thought it would be too chaotic for her to get to point A to point B. And I wanted her to enjoy her time here. So I thought it was best. And I advised her to just look for somewhere closer to where she was going to be working.
Got it. Okay. So, what advice do you have for a homeowner who is considering opening up their space for co-living. And then what advice do you have for someone who is looking to embark? Maybe they want to downsize or try a new city and they want to get into co-living. So for those two profiles, what advice would you have?
So I would say for homeowners who are looking to share their space, and I guess this could apply to anyone who's looking to share their space. I would say consider whether or not you're comfortable sharing your space, right? Sharing your things. If you're the type of person who loses sleep over a broken plate or a glass, or your forks go missing, you can't
Right.
find them. If this is something that you're going to lose sleep over, this is probably not for you. If you're a person who cannot resolve challenges with others using effective communication, it's probably not for you. And if you're the kind of person who, after that communication, determined that something doesn't work for you and you need to have a hard conversation with someone, because things in life happen. I definitely have had situations where, people couldn't pay the rent when I expected them to at the agreed upon time. If you're going to lose sleep over having the rent that's a week late or a month late,
Mhm.
then it's probably not for you. And that's probably more specific to, I guess, homeowners.
Mhm.
If you are a homeowner considering this, I would say consider the layout of your home, because it'll be a lot easier if you can create some sort of privacy. Despite having shared spaces, I think you would be more appealing to others who are looking for that kind of situation. I would say if you're someone who doesn't keep up with home maintenance, um if you don't consider that as something that's important, you don't want to get into this either. um Also, I would say if you're a very rigid person,
Mhm.
this isn't for you either.
Yeah.
I think you need to be open-minded. You need to be a person who communicates effectively, and you need to be someone who other people find approachable and easy to talk to, because there may be a challenge that you have to face. And on top of that, having someone living with you is creates a level of community.
Yeah.
And if you I feel like that community can be a very supportive one. So sometimes I've had situations where, I've had to sit in the kitchen in passing and have a conversation because someone was having a bad day, or maybe they just wanted to talk, and I kind of picked that up. So we had those conversations, and it helped them, or maybe I needed that support and they were there too. So if you're not willing to kind of, have that kind of conversation, if you don't have that kind of open personality, then you should probably just be honest with yourself about who you are. And it's okay to live alone, right? Some people prefer
Right,
it.
right.
Other people prefer for you to live alone too. So you should do that. Um, I would say, overall, though, I would say go for it. Vet your potential housemates. Discuss everyone's why, right? Like, why are you
Mhm.
doing this? And by that, I mean, some people are in need of housing. There may be some desperation there, right? And I would steer clear of those folks, because those are the hardest people to get rid of. They're the hardest people to, kind of get along with. And also, when it comes to vetting, I would say vetting also includes doing a background check. So Furnish Finder, built into Furnish Finder, is an option to collect your rent if that's what you want to use the tool to do. And you can also run background checks. I highly encourage everyone to run background checks, because you do never really know a person until you live with them. And that might turn out to be a great thing, but you don't want to live with someone who has a seedy
Right,
background,
past. Right.
or has a history of evictions, poor interactions with people. They don't pay their bills. That will be a terrible situation. So definitely do that background check. And even after that background check comes through, go out to lunch. sit down and get to know one another, spend some time with each other to see whether or not you like each other. Because even though it's a month to month, if it's a good situation, it may stretch into a longer situation.
Okay.
So hold on one second,
Okay.
please.
No problem.
Sorry about that. That's my co-pilot.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, have lunch, have a conversation, get to know this person. Make sure again that you understand why it is that they want to do this, who they are, and also what their expectations are from this situation as well.
Hmm.
It's something that could lead to again, expansion of your community, your network, someone that you can depend on. I like to travel. Whenever I'm traveling and I'm gone for, maybe weeks at a time, there's someone at my home,
Exactly.
right? And that
Exactly.
gave me a sense of security, and I knew someone was watching my home, and treating it with care. So that was important to me. Also, it has allowed me to have disposable income, right?
Right.
So that
Right.
pays for my travel, that pays for my home renovations,
Right.
right? To make my
Upgrades.
home more appealing to you, right? So that you're comfortable here, right? So it has just allowed me so many things, savings, maxing out my IRA, just I don't have to spend my own money because I have the money that's, that additional source of income that's coming in. So I think there are so many, positives
Hmm.
to co-living, especially amongst women. Again, everybody knows about the Golden Girls, and
Okay.
in
Okay.
the future, I'm probably going to be in a Golden Girl situation. I'm totally
Already in
fine with.
Florida?
Absolutely.
Already.
I'm already in Florida, right?
Okay.
And listen, Miami is 4 hours away. We can make it happen in Orlando. So,
Okay.
I have no regrets. It's something that, like I said, I will continue to do. Even if I did not live here, I will
Mhm.
rent this space out as a co-living space for other women.
Yes, that's awesome. How do you allow them to get their mail at your place, or do you require them, if they're longer term, do you require them to have a PO box and rental insurance? Is that something you deal with them as well, or recommend for them?
So in the past, I have allowed folks to the long termers, the initial long termers, to have mail come here. However, since I've been doing the short term thing, they have to get a PO box, and it's so easy nowadays. The area is right down the street from my house, the UPS store. I provide them with the cost and everything, which is a nominal fee. So I haven't had any trouble with that. In terms of rental insurance, I generally don't ask, them to have rental insurance, but I do, recommend it if they want, just a sense of, insurance for themselves.
Right.
Um, but in the past, I have not required it.
Okay. So how do you envision your co-living future? What's in the works?
So for me, as I said, I could see this as a long-term living strategy for me for keeping expenses lower and allowing me the ability to do other things in my life. Um, in the past few years, and this started before COVID, because again, I already knew that I had like the co-living bug. So I began to kind of look around my circle of friends, and we were talking about it, but I presented to one of my friends starting a women's investment club where, we buy real estate and use it for co-living. So that's something that we're working on now to get started. And, this is our first year, and, we hope to have our first year's investors by, I think we said October. So that's in the works. I have other friends that we just mused about having a compound and having tiny houses on it, and then having a space for gardening, an open space for just communing with one another,
Mhm.
or we even talked about buying a castle or a mansion and maybe renovating it or reconfiguring it so we could all have our shared spaces. And really what we're talking about, I think, is multi-generational housing.
Mhm.
which isn't something new, but I don't know that a lot of African American people at this point practice it. But it's something that our people did before us, and it worked out so well. It's just something that I think going forward is a situation that I will be participating in. So, purchasing land, building homes that are connected in some way, having an outdoor space for gardening, an outdoor space for communing with one another. That's the goal ultimately.
Oh, you have to come back and keep us informed. And I want to know about that investment group. I
Yes.
think it's
Okay.
awesome. My goodness.
Yeah.
Anything else you want
Yeah.
to share with us? You've given us all the best practices. Anything else?
I would say go for it. Make sure you have open communication. Divorce yourself from the material things. Of course, if it makes you feel safer, you can put a lock on your door and have a key. Because I do have an office where I keep personal things, my work equipment. So if I'm on vacation, I do lock my doors, but there's only so much you can do in terms of safety. Locks can get picked. But I do encourage you to just pursue all of those things that make you feel safer. But again, examine yourself, be honest with yourself about what you're comfortable with and uncomfortable with. And if you're comfortable, go for it. And if you're not, don't do it. Just
Okay.
don't.
Awesome. Thank you. We heard it from the co-living OG. She'll be back. She's going to keep us
Yes.
informed about all the grand
Yes.
plans, and
Yeah.
we appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right.